Welcome back to Super Recaps. Today we will be watching a drama, mystery, and a sci-fi movie from 2021, titled Deep. A young man in a doctor's coat stands half-conscious on the roof of a building. People below him are pleading with him not to jump, while a police officer and others are racing up the steps in the hopes of reaching him in time. The man lets go and falls to the ground as soon as the police officer unlocks the roof door. The scene abruptly shifts to a medical university classroom, where the professor and principal Nick Shaw are teaching a lesson on sleeplessness. She explains that worry and anxiety are the most common causes of the disease and that most cases last only a few days. She does, however, highlight rare occurrences of clinical insomnia, which is induced by stressful events and can endure for months or even years. She explains how the brain only gets into complete chaos after 2 sleepless nights, but that 3 sleepless nights can lead to extreme confusion and delirium. In such circumstances, the brain's view of reality is utterly warped, resulting in visual and oral hallucinations. The professor informs the student about hallucinations she had during her studies when she imagined the lab rabbit spoke to her after a few days of being awake. The students chuckle, and the story progresses rapidly to Jane's home. Jane is a medical student who recently moved in with her younger sister, June, at her grandmother's house. She is currently suffering from insomnia and follows a strict nighttime schedule. She returns home and checks the locks incessantly, studies until 2 a.m., goes to the grocery store at 3 a.m., and then makes meals for her family restaurant until 7 a.m. After that, she resumes her normal schedule and attends university until nightfall, when she repeats the same process. She believes that by not sleeping, all 24 hours are utilized and no seconds are wasted. June is clearly worried and stressed, especially since she is responsible for her younger sister and her ailing grandma. She also needs money because her grandmother owes her $728,155 baht, which is $22,432, on a mortgage. Jane is overwhelmed by the pressure. So, she approaches Professor Nick Shaw and informs her that she intends to drop out of medical school. Jane is an exceptional student, and Nick Shaw does not want to lose her. So she provides a solution to her money problem. She hands Jane a business card from Weimar Personal, a German pharmaceutical company that is conducting research into insomnia and compensates test subjects well. Jane's insomnia is known to the professor because she was a participant in her research on the same subject. Jane is enticed by the money and instantly accepts the suggestion and applies to become the test subject. She is accepted shortly after and travels to the company to watch an explanation video about the project. The scientists hope to collect crotonin, a chemical that is released from the thalamus and keeps us awake. Crotonin is used to treat brain-dead patients and is only released when a person is awake, therefore Jane will have to avoid sleeping for a few days. There are 3 levels to the harvesting procedure, and this procedure is called Deep. Higher-level subjects must stay awake for longer periods of time in exchange for greater money. When the tutorial concludes, the facility's director, Dr. Hans Miller, enters the audience and describes how he hopes to revolutionize the pharmaceutical industry by extracting crotonin. He tells Jane that she will need a microchip implant to harvest crotonin from her brain in order to participate in Deep. Jane agrees to begin level 1 in exchange for 100,000 baht, which is $3,000. After implanting the microchip in her neck, the doctor attaches a watch to her wrist that measures her heartbeat and the amount of crotonin collected. When her crotonin level hits 100%, she must visit the facility to have her microchip removed. But the doctor warns Jane about 2 things before she leaves. To begin with, she must keep the research a secret because she signed an NDA to protect the company from the competition. Second, under no circumstances can she sleep for longer than 60 seconds. The microchip may short-circuit and stop her heart if she does. He assures her that the watch will begin to beep as soon as she falls asleep, allowing her to wake up on time. Jane returns home later and begins her evening ritual. It appears that time is going slow because she is bored and sleepy at 2 a.m. Furthermore, her crotonin level is only 39%. She wakes up to discover her sleeping grandmother out of bed and laying on the floor. Jane is startled, but it turns out that Granny had misplaced her dentures and was searching under the bed for them. Jane chuckles and proceeds to give her grandmother a massage to help her relax. They are startled by the sound of a car. June, her younger sister, is running late and is taking a ride from a suspicious boy. Jane approaches her sister and interrogates her about the man, suspecting that her sister is having affairs. Jane accidentally damages her sister's phone during their quarrel, causing June to become further upset and flee. Jane is eating at the university canteen on day 2 of level 1 when Win, one of her co-workers, discovers the watch from Deep and approaches her. Win is a night owl who is usually up and has opted to enroll in Deep as well. Jane cautions him not to discuss the research because they signed an NDA, but Win reveals how other students are also involved. Sen, a well-known beauty blogger, and Peach, an unpopular gamer who is smitten by Sen. The two other students soon join them at the table and begin discussing the findings. Peach expresses suspicions about the company, especially because they will perish if they fall asleep, but Jane dismisses her concerns, claiming that all they have to do is stay awake to live. Despite their differences, the four immediately become friends and add each other on social media. Wynn develops affection for Jane as well. Because everyone's watch is nearly full, they agree to go to the company together and have their microchips removed. In the meantime, everyone goes about their daily routines. Sen begins live broadcasting, Jane assists at home, Wynn throws parties, and Peach plays video games while stalking Sen on the internet. After only a day, all of their watches have reached 100%, so they go to the company to get their chips removed and embark on a shopping spree. Peach improves his game room, Wynn purchases an expensive watch and an aquarium, Sen visits a cosmetician, and Jane settles a debt. They later meet at a bowling alley and have a good time. Sen tells them that she's been being followed since she started Deep, and she thinks it's someone from the facility. Nobody believes her, and they begin arguing whether or not to proceed to level 2. They all need more money, so they vote yes and form an online support group to help each other through the process. They call the group Non, since Non means no in French and sleep in Thai, therefore the full name of the group is No Sleep. While they are having fun, Jane gets up to leave because she has to take care of her grandma, and Wynn leaves Sen and Peach together because he knows the gamer likes the influencer. Peach is an introvert, he barely speaks to Sen, who is still concerned about the stalker. Peach warns her to be careful since there are a lot of psychos out there, and he cares about her. Sen notices that she likes him, so she makes fun of him before boarding a cab. Jane is studying at home when her sister arrives late for the second time. As an apology, June gives her a new phone that she purchased with the money from Deep. The students' lives are more difficult than we imagine. While Jane is apologizing to her sister, Wynn walks into his cluttered, book-filled home and hardly talks to his father. Sen also has a strained connection with her family, who are pressuring her to study medicine despite her preference for communication. Because of this reason, she was initially stressed and qualified for the Deep projects with her insomnia. All of the students go to the facility in the morning to continue level 2. Dr. Hans adds that they will have to avoid sleeping for longer periods of time and that the required time varies depending on the individual. He tells them that based on their previous performance, their crotonin level should reach 100% in 5 days. The students are undecided about continuing unless Hans offers them 500,000 baht, which is around $15,000. In the next scene, the four students are barely conscious. Peach's watch starts beeping as he nods out for a few seconds, and Wynn is half-consciously strolling along a corridor, unable to focus his gaze. He enters a basketball court barely able to stand, and his watch reads 44%. Wynn begins to have auditory hallucinations, imagining one of the players whispering, "No wonder his mother committed suicide." He attacks the player and punches him in the face after visualizing this. Fortunately, his teammates are able to calm him down, and he is soon conscious of his surroundings. Jane isn't keeping up either, as she checks the locks 10 times in a row. She is also concerned about her sister's guitar playing, which leads to a major argument between the two of them. June becomes suspicious of Jane's actions and the manner in which she obtained funds to purchase a new phone, and she demands answers. June does not believe Jane when she claims she has a part-time job as a tutor. Jane leaves after a quarrel, but her sister discovers a business card from Deep on the desk. Jane is barely awake the next morning and is performing an autopsy on a body during class. She sees a vision of the body having her grandmother's face and shouts in front of everyone while cutting. Sen, on the other hand, is barely strolling through the university's hallways, and her view is skewed. She is also bothered by the fact that other classmates are wearing Deep watches. The four sleep-deprived students meet in the canteen, each with a low percentage on their watches. Despite her exhaustion, Jane sees that Wynn's crotonin levels are at least 10% greater than the others. She concludes that his percentage is higher because he exercises and that crotonin levels are likely affected by movement. As a result, the students devise a strategy. They enjoy a party at Peach's place, swimming in his pool and drinking sweet sodas. Wynn has a talk with Jane after they have a lot of fun. She tells him that she only studies and cares for her grandmother, whereas Wynn exclusively parties and drinks. When he inquires about her parents, she becomes quiet and has flashbacks to their murder. Jane swiftly shifts the conversation's focus, but they notice Peach attempting to sleep. Sen comes up with a distracting solution by waxing his leg hair to rouse him up. But Wynn has something even better in mind. He creates drinks with stimulant pills stolen from the faculty pharmacy. Jane cautions him that one of the chemicals may induce strokes, but Wynn believes that risking a stroke is preferable to falling asleep and dying. They consume the cocktails and become quite drunk as a result. Sen, Wynn, and Peach begin to dance, while Jane remains seated due to dizziness. Everyone is concerned since she is displaying no reactions when she suddenly begins to dance as if there is no tomorrow. They all have a great time, and Jane even kisses Wynn, giving him some false optimism. Sen is washing her face in the bathroom after a while when she begins to visualize she has a pimple. She hears her own voice coming from Peach's room as she exits the restroom. Inside the room, Sen notices that Peach's computer is showing dozens of her Instagram videos at the same time. She also sees photographs of herself hung on the ceiling above his bed and has a terrifying hallucination of her laughing in the mirror, following which she passes out. When her watch starts beeping, everyone rushes inside the room, hoping to rouse Sen. They see she doesn't have a pulse, so June starts performing CPR on her. Peach is crying, and Win is yelling at him because he's a weirdo and it's his fault Sen is dying. All of them attempt furiously to save Sen, and she miraculously awakens at the last possible moment. Because it was a stressful scenario, all of their watches quickly filled up. Nobody wants to continue with Deep after Sen's near-death experience, so they go to take their money and swear never to walk inside the company again. They finally obtain their 8 hours of sleep and resume their daily lives. Peach approaches Sen a few days later and tries to apologize, stating that he was only stalking her because he liked her. Sen, on the other hand, threatens to contact security and destroy their friendship. Professor Nick Shaw, on the other hand, blames Jane because her grades have decreased. Jane claims she didn't have time to study due to the research, and Nick Shaw urges her to give up. Deep. Jane informs her that she has just quit, and the professor gives her a motivating speech, telling her that she must concentrate on her studies now so that she can earn money afterward. Win approaches Jane afterwards and invites her to an Ed Sheeran performance. She expresses her disinterest in both the concert and him. Jane isn't searching for a relationship right now because her hands are already full. Win goes to a bar to drown his sorrows after being rejected by Jane, but he can't get Jane's kiss out of his mind. He also learns that his father threw away his mother's belongings. Win becomes enraged, confronting his father and demanding an explanation. His father didn't want them to be burdened by her memories for the rest of their lives. Out of sight, out of mind, he says this to Win. The young man becomes enraged and tells his father, "You may forget about her on your own, I won't." Then Win tells his father the unpleasant truth. He merely tossed away the items to forget about how he failed to save her in the first place. If Win had been his father, he claims he would have never given up and saved his mother. Meanwhile, Jane notices an ambulance bringing the body of a recently deceased student to the campus. She becomes alarmed when she finds a Deep watch on the student's wrist. When she comes home, she witnesses yet another dreadful image. Her grandmother had a stroke after falling to the floor. She drives her grandmother to the hospital, where June arrives late. Jane informs her that they must relocate their grandmother to another hospital because they cannot afford this one. June, on the other hand, hands her a paper bag stuffed with cash and which has Weimar's logo on him. Jane turns around and notices a chip on her sister's neck. June leaves with the nurse to check on their grandmother after they had a quarrel. Jane returns home afterward to find her sister missing. Dr. Hans is installing another chip into June as she arrives in Weimar. Jane threatens to contact the cops, but Hans reminds her that she signed a non-disclosure agreement and then blackmails her. She must encourage her other pals to continue with stage 3 if she wants to remove the chip from her sister. The sisters leave the hospital and seek assistance from their friends, Sen, Win, and Peach. Even if June reaches 100%, Hans will not remove June's chip until the three of them agree. Peach and Sen despise the concept and refuse to risk their lives once more. Sen thinks it's a bad bet because they'll have to risk 4 lives to save one. But Win tells her that it was Jane who saved her life, and she owes her gratitude to her. Despite Jane's urging, Sen leaves, and Peach follows shortly after. Win is the only one willing to assist, and he swears not to abandon the sisters. Later, when visiting their grandma in the hospital, the sisters open out to one another. June apologizes for her actions and claims she wasn't thinking clearly. Jane consoles her, and the two sisters hold hands, unsure how they will make it through stage 3. Sen is at home, doing a live feed when she begins to recall the pleasant times she had with the other students. Peach is also revisiting old memories and begins to cry, regretting his behavior with his crush. Jane, June, and Win arrive in Weimar the next morning, but Peach is already waiting for them. After all, he changed his mind and agreed to assist the sisters. Sen soon follows, declaring that she does not want to be in debt to anyone. The 4 of them begin level 3 together, but Jane has devised a strategy. They travel to Professor Nick Shaw after getting chipped, who will assist them during the experiment. She keeps them awake by putting them in her father's old abandoned ward and giving them Exeril. She tells them to call the intercom if they need more assistance and then leaves them alone. After a few days, everything appears to be fine, but on the 6th day, things gradually unravel. Peach begins to have auditory hallucinations and hears gunfire coming from the other ward. Win is hallucinating as well, seeing his deceased mother approaching him in the corridor, while Jane imagines her sister bleeding and dying and begins to revive her. June begins to console her sister, convincing her that she is still alive, and then each student begins to notice and gain awareness. Sen, on the other hand, is staring in the mirror in the bathroom when a million pimples sprout on her face. She smashes the mirror and then accuses Jane of causing her skin harm. Sen becomes obnoxious and begins attacking everyone, claiming Win is yearning for Jane's attention and that Peach is a psychopath. Win becomes enraged with Sen, while Peach tries to defuse the situation. Win becomes enraged and tells him that no one wants to be friends with a sick loser. He provokes Peach so quickly that they begin fighting and no one can stop them. Jane is terrified, so she uses the intercom to request assistance from the professor. She exits the room and begins hunting for Nick Shaw because no one is responding. However, she discovers in one of the rooms how Nick Shaw has been observing them through security cameras and following their movements. Jane also discovers audition papers for an actor who resembles Dr. Hans. Nick Shaw, it turns out, hired an actor to play a doctor while she was in charge of the entire operation. Jane flees away to her pals after the professor discovers her snooping. Nick Shaw is watching her fall down from the top of the stairs and she slowly approaches Jane. Jane makes it to the room where everyone is fighting and begins dialing 911, but there is no service. Nick Shaw locks them in the ward and tells them she'll take away the chips once they've reached 100%. Sen then destroys all of the cameras and informs the doctor that she will never receive her microchips because she is coming to kill her. Win falls asleep unexpectedly, and his alarm goes off. Despite the efforts of the others to save him, he does not awaken and instead dreams of his deceased mother, who shoots herself. Win's watch reaches 0 seconds, indicating that he has slept for more than a minute. Everyone is in tears since they were unable to save him and he died. When Nick Shaw receives word that one of the kids has died, she goes into the ward to retrieve his body and remove the chip. He jumps up and slaps her on the head as she is doing this. She was tricked by the students. They intentionally switched off the cameras so Win could take CCL, which causes temporary cardiac arrest. If they can't get away, they decide they can at least pretend death and make it to the professor's room. Jane inquires about Nick Shaw's terrible experiment when she rises from the floor. The professor then pulls back a curtain to reveal her old sweetheart, Jed, who is in a coma. It's the same individual who jumped from the rooftop at the start of the film. He was a medical student who was experiencing horrible hallucinations as a result of his sleep deprivation experiments. Since then, Nick Shaw, his girlfriend, has been attempting to revive him with crotonin. She assures the students that she genuinely cares about them and has never intended to harm them. Nick Shaw has also been harvesting crotonin from her own body, which she shows to the students by displaying her neck wounds. But, because no one believes she is acting in good faith, she strikes Jane and injects her with Valium, which makes her unconscious. June and Win attempt to save her, while Peach and Sen fight the professor who is attempting to inject them with the needle. Jane is given CPR, but she does not wake up and stays unconscious even after a minute has passed. Meanwhile, Sen bashes the professor's head with a keyboard and saves her stalker Peach from getting injected after a hard fight. Jane, on the other hand, is still sleeping, and June is wailing over her corpse, with her fist striking her sister's heart. Jane awakens unexpectedly, and everyone is relieved. Doctors remove their chips even if they never receive the money for level 3, and they return to their usual lives, which are now even better. Win reconciles with his father, who promises to return all of his mother's belongings while his son sobs on his shoulder. Sen continues to be an Instagram influencer but now studies communication rather than medicine. Win and Jane are dating, and Peach has given up gaming to live with his friends in the real world. Most importantly, instead of sleeping like the dead and never seeing the sun again, everyone decided to sleep like a rock. Subscribe and turn on the notifications to watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.